Is the Batwing fairing already dead for Harley Davidson? No, I don't think so. I think we are in a weird spot right now. And I think we are also a little bit of a victim of our own algorithm. I don't think the Batwing is going to fully die just because there's such a cult, almost a cult following behind the Batwing fairing. Some guys that are just tried and true, like this is the classic look for Harley Davidson, and they don't want anything else, and they're always going to buy street glides. I think that classic look is going to keep it alive for quite some time, and I also think by the end of this I might convince you that street glides are eventually going to come back, and it may be sooner than what we're thinking. And don't forget the overall market. Sometimes we look at things from the micro standpoint, and it's difficult to zoom out to a bird's eye view and see the macro standpoint. With street glide fairings, electric glide fairings, Batwing fairings, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of guys who are on Batwing still, and they're just not the younger generation that's posting stuff online. And it's not stuff that's really trending either. And don't forget that what your algorithm shows you is just what the algorithm thinks you want to see. So a lot of this stuff may not be popping up for, me. I'm posting road glides because I own a road glide, and I post road glides for work all the time. And most people that are shopping are buying road glides in my demographic, so maybe my algorithm is just showing me more road glides because it thinks that's what I want to see. Lately I've been hearing a rhetoric that nobody rides street glides anymore. People just don't see street glides anymore. And I think that's just due to where we are and our local demographic in Southern California, because I bet there's a lot of demographics out there where that's all you see is Batwings, depending on the area that you're in. But why is the road glide doing better? And why don't we have a road glide ultra like we have a street glide ultra? Which is kind of weird. Maybe Harley knows that it's a certain demographic that is looking for the full dresser. I've heard quite a few complaints that there is no road glide ultra, but I've heard equal complaints about the street glide ultra as it is, that people don't really like how it's set up. They think it's missing things that a limited should have. I've also seen some comments of people saying that they wish there was a street glide CVO ST, and why isn't Harley putting out a street glide CVO ST? So I don't know if overall in the market, everywhere else, I'm really only exposed to my demographic and what we see here in Southern California in our community. I don't know how well a street glide ST would do. I think there's a handful of people out there that would comment and say like, oh, if they made that bike, I would buy it. But I don't know if that merits an entire model, especially in the price point that the ST model is in. I think some of the influence is also the king of the baggers. When they started this and Wyman was first on a Batwing fairing, he was on a street glide. I think that was only the first season, and since then he's been on a road glide. We've seen that trickle down as well. The CVO ST is only in a road glide platform. The new CVO RR is only as a road glide as well. In our demographic, I hear a lot of reasons why people prefer the road glide over the street glide. I think there's a lot of things out there that I don't necessarily agree with, but I also don't disagree with, and it kind of comes down to a personal preference thing. Like we still do placebo testing for pharmaceuticals. They take 12 grown adults and nobody knows if they're getting a real pill or a sugar pill, and there's always a percentage of people who take a sugar pill that physiologically see benefits to having taken the pill, even though the pill is not the actual pharmaceutical drug that's being tested. So that's a real thing, and I always tell people if it matters to you, it matters. To me, it doesn't matter. Like the Batwing versus the road glide fairing, I don't really have a terrible preference between the two. My first Harley was an electric glide, and I kind of stripped it down to be more of a street glide, and I loved that bike. I've heard of the wobble thing where the wind will catch the fairing and cause like tank slapping. I never had that personally happen to me. I've ridden with a lot of guys that have Batwing fairings. I've never seen that happen. Not to discount if it's happened to you, that's terrible and terrifying. I wouldn't buy one again if that happened to me. But I never had that experience, and I put quite a few miles on that fairing. Some people talk about heavier steering where, the fairing is mounted to the bar, so when you turn your handlebars, you're turning the weight of the fairing as well, and the road glide is independent of that. I don't really see that. I don't really feel that when I ride either one of them. I also always kind of defer to the rodeo guys, the guys that do the police rodeo, and they do all of that crazy stuff. The Robert Simmons and Ryan Urlachers and all the guys that do the rodeo. I've been to those things, and they're absolutely amazing what they can do. And I just don't see how, if they had a road glide fairing, they would be any better, because the same guy can do all the same stuff, whether he's on the Electric Glide Police or he's on the Road King Police. So I don't really buy into the idea that the fairing makes it more difficult to operate the motorcycle, just because I've seen some of these talented people, these really skilled and talented people, do amazing things on them, and I don't think the fairing is holding them back by any means. I do think bar compatibility is a really big thing. So usually when people ask me like, well, what's the difference between the two? One of the first things I mention to them is that the Street Glide can feel a little bit more limiting on the handlebars. So if you like the stock bars, then it's not an issue. Or if you know exactly what kind of bars you like and they make those bars for the Street Glide fairing, then you also have nothing to worry about. But the fact remains that it is limiting on the Street Glide when it comes to aftermarket bar options. You have to get a bar that is made specifically for your fairing. Whereas the Road Glide, being a fixed fairing, a frame-mounted fairing, the bars and the triple trees are turning independently of the fairing, and so that's all far more exposed, and you have a lot more freedom to do whatever you want with your bars. And we know how important bars are. I think the top 3 mods that you're going to do on a new bike is you're going to do ergonomics, your seat, your bars, and then you're probably going to change out your pipes. Those are the top 3, whether you're doing slip-ons or you're doing a full 2-in-1. So I think that makes a big difference, especially if you're going with T-bars, which is very, very popular now. I love T-bars. I've been riding with T-bars for quite some time. I prefer them. I had them on my Batwing fairing, and it covered the gauges. Like, I could only see the very tippy top of my gauge without like leaning over and looking over my bars. I think we've also had a negative connotation to the word influencer, like the people who are influencers of an industry. That being said, whether you like that term or not, or whether you agree with the negative connotation in that or not, we are still influenced by what's going on in social media, for sure. I mean, you see some of these bikes and the amount of likes that they get, the amount of shares that they get, that is influence. And I think a lot of us are being influenced by these things, and you see something and it looks amazing, and I want to build something like that, or I want to take some of those features and incorporate that into my bike. In a lot of ways, I think we are being influenced by these things, and I know for my algorithm specifically, all I ever see is Road Glides. I hardly ever see Batwings unless it's somebody that I specifically follow and they have a Street Glide. But now with the Gen 3 fairings, it makes even more sense with the bar setup because the drawer is on the Street Glides. So if you do want to go with the T-bar style, you're sacrificing your drawer. I really think that someone needs to come out with some sort of 3D printed option that replaces the drawer in that rear nacelle there that has where your key locks, and offer some kind of setup for Street Glides to run T-bars. I think it could be 3D printed. I don't have the capability to do that, but I think it would be great if somebody did. If you deleted the drawer, you moved your media cable down so you could still have that feature, and then you had a nice piece that just bolted right up, and you could run a pullback plate and you could run risers and bars. On that note, I think shorter risers are coming back. I think for a while we went taller risers, and now we're kind of going back to shorter risers with a high bend bar. And I think that's a good thing. I think shorter risers, as I've aged and as I've changed, I'm kind of liking bars that are more sternum level than what I used to like. I used to like them to be shoulder height. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see more shorter risers with a high bend bar, especially with the way the screen is now, with the way the gauges are now. I think that's coming, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who's thought of, making a piece that replaces the drawer on there so you can run a pullback plate and T-bars on a Street Glide fairing. Now, the only reason I think that this is important to talk about is because we kind of have these waves over time. And if you do take a step back and you look at the macro, everything seems to be going Road Glide right now. And there will be a point where I think we might almost already be there, where the market is saturated with a certain style. And once that happens, bikers are going to do what bikers do, which is we rebel. And we don't want to do the status quo, and we don't want to do what everybody else is doing. We want to be different. And I think that's going to spark the rise of the Street Glide. I think as soon as somebody starts to make it affordable and make it make sense and make it look beautiful on a Street Glide fairing to run T-bars and appeal to that crowd that really likes T-bars on baggers, I think once somebody figures that out and they make it to where everybody can have it, where it's an affordable system, it makes sense, it works well, it looks good, and it performs well, I think we're going to see a lot of people switching over to the Batwing because everyone else is on a Road Glide. A lot of these changes take time. you know? So somebody will see something, they might be influenced by something, and it takes them a year and a half to get that bike, and then it takes them even longer to build that bike out. And so some of this change comes kind of slow, but I do think that somebody's going to build a really cool street glide. Somebody's going to come out with parts for street glide to run T-bars and to be in that performance era. And then somebody's going to start pointing a finger at other people and saying, everybody has a road glide, man. Why don't you do something different? I know it would on me, because sometimes I feel that way, to where like, why did I get a road glide? And I got a road glide because I've never owned a road glide. I've had a Batwing, and I had, you know, a Road King with an RT fairing on it, and I never owned a road glide. Road glides are popular. I crashed my Road King, so I needed to buy a bike, and I've never owned a road glide, so I got a road glide. And they look good. They're popular. They're in style. So I thought it was kind of a no-brainer thing. But now I'm starting to think that, like, man, everybody has a road glide. What else could I do? Could I do something different? But now, as I look at it and I see all the bikes rolling up to the shop, which we see quite a few coming into the shop, they're either road glides that are super modern, like the styling is super modern. You have that kind of gold accent look, or the bronze accent look, and the T-bars and the saddlemen are Lapera and a 2-in-1, and you have that very, it's almost becoming a cookie cutter look on the road glide. And then all the street glides that come up are a little bit more old school. They've got apes, or they've got meat hooks, and they might have a 21-inch front wheel. And I'm kind of waiting for that to shift over, and it might be the next bike I buy. If this hasn't already taken off and a bunch of people aren't doing street glides in like a club style or a performance bagger style way, I might have to get a street glide next, just because everybody's got a road glide, including me. You guys let me know what you think. Who has a street glide out there? Who's got a road glide? Who would never ride a street glide? I think the tides are going to change pretty soon. I've always loved the street glide. It was my first Harley, so it kind of holds a special place in my heart. I think they're beautiful. I think they're very classy looking. I really like the new fairing. I like the way the lights look, especially when it's dark out and you see that Omega headlight and the strips coming off the side. I think it looks really cool. I think the downside is that you can't run tall T-bars on it, but I would love to see somebody come out with something that cleans up that inner fairing, so you can run a pullback plate, you can run a nice Kraus bar setup, maybe with 6-inch risers and a high bend bar, so you can get that overall 8 to 10 inch height. With the pullback plate, that's probably going to put it at 11, maybe even 12. And I think that's going to be a really good setup where you can still see the screen, you get the T-bar effectiveness, and you're not running a road glide just like everybody else.